Hello, everyone. My name is Amber Viola, and welcome to My Culty College. On this podcast, we talk about people who went to a culty college. A lot of the people I've interviewed went to Master's Commission, different variations, different places. Some people went to other evangelical cult-like programs. Today, I have Gavin on with me, and he actually found me through a interview I did about Master's Commission on a podcast called On the Stacks. So shout out to them. So thank you so much for coming on. And I really appreciate you coming to talk to me and being vulnerable and sharing your story.
Of course. And again, thank you for sharing your story. I think kind of funny enough, every few months, I'll Google Master's Commission just to see what's out there. And it literally was the other day, and I just happened to go to like Google page 3, and your video was at the top. And then I was like, what is this? I've not seen this before. And you inspired me to, like I said, reach out and, talk about it. So here we are.
I'm really glad that I could. And I also randomly will Google it and kind of look it up. So with that, when you originally were going and you looked it up or you heard about it, what did you think Masters was?
So, maybe similar to some folks who went and maybe attended a church that had a master's program. I grew up in a church that had a master's program. So, my first exposure to Master's Commission was actually when I was in middle school. And
Okay.
so all I could see when I was that young and growing up was, oh my gosh, these young people are, as they would say, on fire for God.
Yeah.
And then their life trajectory takes them to the corners of the world, and they're going to make all this difference. Or there's a trajectory and pathway to ministry, and you can come here and give your life for 9 months or 2 years or whatever the deal would
The
be.
stick was,
And then
yeah.
exactly. And then from there, your life is just peaches and cream. And from a very young age, that's really the outlook I had on it. So that's kind of where it started for me. Like I said, in middle school.
Was it completely different from watching it from the outside to like being in it?
Yes, because as a middle schooler, as a high schooler, you're seeing. Let's say, I mean, as has been discussed with masters, like you're living in this program, right? So there's 24 hours a day, 365, or however many days are in 9 months, and as a high schooler, you're only seeing, if I go to the church, Sundays and Wednesdays and maybe a random Thursday because I want to go hang out, I'm seeing them for, maybe a collective 6 hours out of the week, right? So even if they're telling me, oh yeah, we do scripture tests and we do outreach and we do chair stacking, we all know about that.
Right.
We do events
Stacked a
and we
lot of
do.
chairs.
Bro, I'm telling you what, if I had muscles, they'd be dedicated to chair stacking, but it's been a long time, so they've gone away since. But as a young person, as a middle schooler, yeah, I mean, or as a high schooler, you're only seeing this small snippet. So of course, when you get in, and then all of a sudden it's sign the covenant contract, write all the things down, follow the rules of the second years who are maybe 6 months older than you. It's that structure that all of a sudden just comes down on you. And so, yeah, absolutely different. Absolutely different.
So let's talk about then when you kind of initially were going to Masters. So why did you decide to go?
So I grew up, like I said, in a church that had Master's Commission. In fact, I went to a church here in Dallas. That's where I'm currently living, and I was living at the time. And the church was hosting Master's Commission USA, which was the founding Master's Commission, the one that supposedly everybody was jealous of, right? Or
Right.
whatever the hell that means, right? But when it came time for me, I was like, when I was in high school, I had already made the decision I wasn't going to go to college. My parents were not very encouraging of me to go to college. I grew up in an evangelical household. My dad was a pastor growing up. So there was a lot of like encouragement for me to figure out how I can get into some sort of ministry.
And a lot of people don't realize in the evangelical side of it, there isn't a push for education. That's something that is very low on the totem pole. So you get a lot of people who are coming into these programs who don't want to go to college, don't think they need to, never really thought about it ever, and so they're coming into programs like this because they don't want to go to college because evangelicals don't really like push the whole college thing.
Which is interesting because there's also, as you had mentioned, you went to Liberty, and there is also like SAGU here in Dallas, which is like one of the largest Assemblies of God colleges, and it's so expensive. It is basically, it's very similar to Master's Commission with the way that people are treated, right? Like it's like
Right.
you are an
Yeah.
adult, but we have all this construct of rules, and so even being a college itself, it is not like a regular college experience, and
Right. Right.
very, very plagued by a lot of weird stuff. But so yeah, you're absolutely right. My parents, love them. They're probably gonna listen to this. Shout out. They did not encourage me to go to college, and in fact, my brother had gone to Master's Commission USA.
Mhm.
He went for 1 year, and that completely fucked him up, straight
Wow.
up. And then when I was like, I want to go, they were like, well, maybe it'll work this time. and that's not even being hyperbolic. Okay. That's kind
Right.
of the discussions we had about, well, if you really did want to go into ministry, this would probably be the path. And so I had decided, and I was pretty close with my pastors and leadership all here at Masters, even as a high schooler. And I was like,
Mhm.
hey, I think it'd be beneficial for me not to go to one that
Right.
I'm so familiar with. So they recommended, they recommended a couple programs that they, think that I would have enjoyed. And I ended up going to Crossroads Masters in Lafayette, Louisiana. And that was my first time leaving home. I had a full-time job. And in fact, kind of in parallel with like my upbringing being a little weird, is that
Yeah.
my senior year, I decided to, my senior year of high school, I decided to be homeschooled, personal decision, so I could work a full-time job and then intern at my church full-time. So I can
Right.
kind of have like this pseudo Master's Commission experience and then have money to then go to Master's Commission because I knew
Right.
you couldn't work.
You couldn't work when you're there. Yeah. Yeah.
So save up money, tuition, and at Crossroads they didn't do the $20 stipend like I know that you said at Rockford they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't do that there, so I had to have money, and then my parents were sending money, and yeah, so that was kind of like my step into my own sense of self, which was go to a different Master's Commission that I wasn't familiar with in a state I had never been to,
Mhm.
and believe that this was the path.
Right. And we had so many people who were homeschooled. I was homeschooled for a long time as well.
Yeah.
People who
Yeah.
had never been away from home before. So
Yeah.
you have these kids who are so sheltered and
Yeah.
don't know how to live on their own,
Yeah.
and there's not really this focus on how to teach you how to just live and be a human, and
Correct.
survive and stuff, because people were, struggling. So
Yeah.
once you got there, like day one, week one, what were you thinking during that time?
Okay, so there's two sides to this. Okay, there is in the moment, like as you're asking me, but then like I am years, a decade removed from now, and I look back, and so I want to kind of tell both perspectives kind of
Yeah.
simultaneously. Okay, I was, for one, absolutely bought in. Okay, because again, I had dreamt of this. I was like, I grew up around Masters. These young people. Look, now I'm one of them now, and I can leave here in 9 months and go be a pastor of a mega church because that's what they're going to teach me.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? Now looking back on that again with some perspective, I'm like, again, you drop your kid off who has no life experience in a different state with strangers and can't work again, and in an institution that completely fucked up my brother. And then it's like, what my one side's like, my parents like, what were you thinking? And then for
Right.
me, I'm like, did I not see the forest through the trees? I knew more people, even as an attending student at the church I was at, that left completely fucked up. But you just go, well, that's their crisis of
that was
faith.
them.
Yeah,
They did
they
something
didn't believe
wrong. They
enough.
didn't believe
Yes.
enough.
Exactly.
It was always on them. Yeah.
Exactly. Never on the program, never on the institution. So again, going back to week one, I'm completely bought in. Now, ask me about week two, and I was like, fuck this place. Let me tell you what, because there is a significant difference between being Masters adjacent and then being in the program. Like I said, the full weight of the structure and the rules and
I definitely felt lied to.
Yes.
Because I knew there was rules. I didn't know there was so many rules. And every time I turned around, there's a new rule. And it was
Yes.
like, oh my God, I'm in trouble all the time because and I remember one time being like, is there a rule book like you could give me
Yeah.
that I could know what everything is? And
Yeah.
week one, I was so exhausted
Yeah.
and worn out and annoyed. I don't even think my brain was like functioning right, but definitely when they started with all the rules and stuff, and I was just like, oh, were you guys' rules the same as ours? Like, what were some of the ones that you kind of found?
So there's probably some standard across the rules. All master's commissions probably do this, which is like 6 a.m. prayer or 7 a.m. prayer, whatever, early morning prayer. Don't talk to the opposite gender. Curfew. You can't work. And then, yeah, secular intake
Music
of
and
of
yeah,
media, unless it's a Marvel movie, which became an exception, right? It's like, okay, I mean, Scarlett Johansson looking snatched, and you're telling me I can't watch Marvel, or you're telling me I can watch Marvel, okay?
right.
One of the things that that really bothered me from, like I said, week 2, I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. So we actually had a rule book, we had a handbook that was a part of our covenant, which again, we're using this language and it's like, it's so cringy, but
Right.
along with the covenant, you also signed the rule book that you read it. And then you
Right.
also had to carry around this rule book. Now, what would happen, which is what got me and made me want to freaking leave all the goddamn time, is I felt like I was being policed by my fellow first years, that we couldn't just have this first new
Your
experience.
community,
No.
camaraderie, like you're the Gestapo,
And
okay?
let me tell you what. And I went to a master's commission, like I said, in Louisiana, and I would say a good, not even being hyperbolic, 90% of the student body was from that church or from the surrounding area.
Oh, okay.
So they all kind of knew each other.
Right.
They're all some adjacent, like even if they went to one Assemblies of God church down the road, they knew each other from Assemblies of God conferences and
Right.
youth camps and summer trips and whatever. So they were all kind of adjacent. So I was coming in from the Metroplex, Dallas, Fort Worth Metroplex, 7 million people, to Lafayette, Louisiana, where there's like 200,000 people, which is still a lot, but not 7 million. And in a town where everybody kind of knows each other, even though it's a bigger city in Louisiana, and the churches, especially, everybody knows each other. So I come in not talking like everybody else. My theology is slightly different, even though it's AG, it's different than theirs.
And your culture is so different too, as well. Just being from Dallas,
tolerance, my tolerance for things. I at that time I would not say by any stretch of the imagination I was not progressive, but compared to them, I was progressive.
Right, exactly. I would also agree with that. I mean, I've attended Right to Life marches as a kid, but I still even was so much more progressive than those people. I was like, I'm not hating anybody. I can't.
Yeah.
I was like, on the realest level of it, I don't have the energy. I'm not doing it. I don't have the energy to just be hating everybody, policing everybody. I can't. I got to focus on my life and what I'm trying to do. But,
what got me probably in the most trouble, and again, using that word as a young adult, being policed by other young adults is so stupid. But what got me in the most trouble is my attitude was very much so, I'm here because I want to be a pastor. I'm here to be educated. I'm not here to be this human video doing disciple, whatever that looks like in what year was that? 2011.
Right.
And I felt like there were some people I was like, hey, you want to be a worship pastor? We can probably commune on the idea of wanting to have a career in ministry, not just come here, spend $6,000 to learn how to read the Bible better.
Right.
But that is how some people attended the program. It was for them to have a gap year, which that's a huge push. At least it was back when I was
for ours.
Masters.
It was a push too. It really was a push to like come here before you go to college, get a closer relationship with God, do a gap year type of thing,
Yes.
And they always propositioned ours like it's almost like college. They're like, and I was like, have you guys been to college? Because nobody cares if you're there at 7 a.m. if you're gonna fail, you're gonna fail. There might be one
2.
teacher taking attendance, but
Mm.
like it's just not the same.
No, not at all. And that was the year. I don't know. I think we're probably like 3 years difference. Maybe I was in 2011 was my first year, so I don't know our differences. But that's when West Coast Bible College was offered as a non-accredited bachelor's degree, and so they paired it with.
Okay.
They said you can get your bachelor's in 2 years, unaccredited, but bachelor's in 2 years, because technically doing master's commission work or whatever is
Right.
doing half of the work of an associate's degree. So they were like, hey, come do the 2-year program. It's basically a bachelor's in college, but in 2 years. And obviously that's really appealing to somebody who wanted to be in ministry full time.
Right.
That's really
Did you guys
appealing.
do Berean?
They phased that out at Crossroads right before I got there. Yeah.
Because that was our curriculum.
Yeah. They had that, I think. Man, I think they had that as like, if you really didn't want to do West Coast, you could do Berean, but it wasn't like a part of the regular curriculum schedule. Like you'd have to figure out your own Berean
I
time
think
or
ours
something.
initially was like that, and then they
Yeah.
added it in. And I believe the Berean might have been accredited if you did the whole like 2-year thing. But so did you guys do? You were talking about the covenant ceremony and signing the book and everything. Tell me about that whole thing.
So the first 3 days is now I know a lot of master's commissions do Coram Deo a lot, which is face to face with God, right? Is that what some people have said, or maybe you have also experienced?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Coram Deo translates face to face with God. XMC, Crossroads Master Commission, only does it one time a year, and it's the very first 3 days. And so they take you away. So we land there, like having, opening ceremony day 1. And then that night, it's like everybody loads up on the bus, all your luggage, everything. And we go on away on a 3-day retreat. And this is where they do like, basically the only way I could describe it is like they are trying to purge you of the last 18 or so many years of your life, of your way of living, thinking, sinful nature, a part of the covenant ceremony. Shedding of skin, whatever,
right.
Along with the signing of the rule book, because they read the rule book. It was this big thing. Like they were like, okay, we're going to each take a page and everybody has to read it. And we have to sign every page that you read it, da, 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 da. Then there's like the law, which is XMC rule book. And then there is the biblical law, which is then we hold this big worship night moment. Everybody's snotty, crying because we're begging and weeping and pissing and shitting. And they hand you this thick ass packet and they say, okay, what we're going to do now is there's no time limit on this, but this is for you to write down everything you've ever done in your life. And we're not putting a time limit on it because we really need you to let the Holy Spirit remind you of the bad things you've done so that way you can confess to them.
Yep.
Now, on this side of it,
we didn't write ours down, but they had us in a circle, and I'm pretty sure the first thing I thought was, what?
Yeah. Oh, they had us write it down, and they were like, there's no time limit, again, because they want you to, think and get everything out. So there's, oh my God, this thing takes, I'm not even joking. This thing probably takes up to 8 hours of time because people are really committed. They're like, I'm trying to write everything down. Even at this time. So where I'm at theologically now, I look back and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Back then, I was like, what's the point of asking for forgiveness if then I have to remind myself to write this down for some people I just met less than 24 hours ago?
Why do you want me to tell you my life story? I don't know you.
Yeah, how many times did I masturbate at 13 years old? First of all, countless. All right. Second of all,
none of your business.
Yeah. Second of all, what are you gonna do with that?
That it was gonna be used against me. There was definitely that piece of my brain that was like, anytime people have anything on you, at some point they might use it against you. And that was my initial fear doing that night. And I remember they were like, well, you don't want to be vulnerable. You don't want to, whatever. And I was like, no, I know how humans are. I know how people are. And
Dude.
they did, because the people who said they were having sex, now they're being policed more than everybody else because
Right.
they think you're going to run around and be fucking everybody. And it's,
Right.
just whatever different things people had. And it was just like,
the difference between I probably in our experiences with that is that, so a part of this ceremony, so it's this big emotional thing, takes 1,billion hours to do. They bring us back in and they have us in all early 2000s youth group ways possible, rip it up in front of a cross, and then we take it all and then we go burn it. And it's just like this big moment. And
everything was a moment. I could
oh my
not. I
God.
could not.
And let me tell you this, you said something that like really struck me, because you said that you were being policed for not being vulnerable. That's probably also where I landed, because again, me seeing this more as like, I'm trying to study for a career. I'm not here for these kind of shallow relationships with people that their first experience out of home is this.
Right.
It's
Right.
super. I was I in the right? I don't know. Was I in the wrong? I don't know. I just think that maybe I could have been more tactful, but I definitely was like, everybody's weeping, and I'm like, all right, okay,
That was exactly me. Exactly me. Exactly. And I could have been more tactful, but I also was young. So,
yeah, yeah,
from the East Coast I came into the Midwest.
yeah,
I can't
yeah,
even imagine being in the South. I feel like
yeah.
everybody would have been like, she's so mean.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you what, and it was so like, it was either you're an adult, so act like one, or you're supposed to be a disciple in training, so let us reprimand you for minuscule things. And that, to me, again, when you're talking about vulnerability, like trying to weigh out those two things is like, am I adult? Like, I just paid $6,000. I had to
Right.
scrape my way to be here. I'm on my own legally, so I am an adult. But then you're trying to purge a behavior, or shape a behavior that like is reinforced by opinion or reinforced by faulty theology,
Right.
which
Right.
Lord knows there's plenty of that out there. So
No, yeah, exactly. And so when you were kind of starting out during your first year,
yeah,
what were some of the things that really like stuck out to you
right.
from your first like couple months and stuff there?
So again, and I hit on this right at the top, which is like this student policing. Like that to me was almost encouraged. Like,
It 100% was. Yeah.
and it's viewed through the lens of accountability, which
Yes.
which is a word that lead pastors do not abide by. And yet here we are in this program, and all we are is accountable to one another for thoughts, for liking a song, for mentioning something you've done. It's like, we got to be, disciplined, and you got to come in early now and pray more or longer. And it's, as I have reflected, as I have thought about, like you're asking, the first, let's say, 3 to 4 months, it
Yeah.
was a lot about constantly shaping, constantly trying to align your thoughts with this one tract of thinking, this one tract of spirituality. And that definitely plays a huge part, in my opinion, to like even how I went on to be in my second and my third year, which, because I did multiple years. And you know, um, it was, again, you're talking about being in the South. This is mid 2000s. This is an Obama era presidency. Again, I'm in the South. Hint, hint. You know what's being said. You know how it's going down in the church with politics nowadays. Imagine back then with a black
Mhm.
president. So we're talking about not just theologically trying to bend people, but we're also talking like absolute
Yeah.
socioeconomical, trying to
Right.
make you think a certain way. And that, to me, how is that not culty? Oh, okay. I just thought about this. I was going to mention this too, because it plays into this exact line of thinking, which is, I remember our first maybe 3 weeks. We come together for a morning prayer, and then we always would have like this. Okay, here's the schedule for the day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember one time our director comes in and he goes, "Hey guys, just as a reminder, in case it wasn't said before, because it's not in the rule book, so whatever, but we just want to remind you guys that it's not encouraged to Google Master's Commission. Don't do it. Just stay away from there, because there are people who have chosen to leave the faith and really start bad faith arguments for not just this program, but for many others. So don't give in to their Judas spirit." And I'm like, oh, what? Like, I wasn't even thinking about Googling. Now that's all I want to do is Google.
We had a similar conversation, and it was like, a lot of people that leave or get kicked out are bitter, and
yes, bitterness.
They're angry and they hate God or whatever. And, so you don't want to do things like that. I think that's weird. And now I want to look up everything and see what everybody is saying, But what was your day-to-day like? So what was a normal day for you?
It's so funny you asked that, because literally I just moved recently, and to get into this place, I had like all of my master's commission stuff. I had journals and study books and folders and all this stuff, which had some schedules in it. Yeah. And I was like, I'm getting this out of here. This is like a boogeyman in the closet. Like, I look at it, it's like jump scare. Jesus Christ, it's there. So I got rid of it. So I would have liked to have a calendar to look at to give you, because it was like, it's like history. But basically it's wake up in the morning for prayer, which you had to be up within, I believe they mandated 30 minutes beforehand. And your second year had to make sure that you were up 30 minutes in advance before prayer so you can get ready. Crossroads was different because they had apartments that they had purchased on the church campus. Okay. So we could walk to the facility. Unlike, I know a lot of people had home openers.
Yeah, we had apartments, but you had to drive. So
yeah, I know a lot of other MCs had apartments across town or whatever. They were lucky enough that they had this apartment complex that was on their property. That's nice. So we were able to, have that 30-minute increment. But anyway, so your second year made sure you got up, which, man, my second year, God, Lord, Jesus, we can get in all that. But we get up at 6:30, prayer at 7, and then we had like a rally at about 8 o'clock to 8:30 going over special events of the church, schedule things that are changing, and then it was like, okay, then we're going to go do a study. And they would do these John Bevere studies where they would break down his book and have curriculum. And we would do that for like 2 hours. And then we had probably, about an hour for lunch.
Right.
Then we come back. And then it's like, okay, now it's a carved out time for your, what were they calling it? Institutes. Which again,
the little special things that you would do.
Exactly. And that was the college adjacent language, right? It's like, oh, your minor, your institute is basically like your minor. And so it's like, go with the youth pastor if you're doing youth, go be with the media team if you're doing media, worship, outreach, and another one. Okay, I don't remember. But I was in youth, and the youth pastor at the time is super young guy, kind of inexperienced. So we kind of just like hung out for 9 months. It was like Wednesday night comes up every week, and some reason we were always surprised that we had to prepare something for freaking Wednesday night, and then after institutes, it's like probably another gathering where we all come together, and this would probably be when we would do probably like last of the day announcements or something. They're always announcing something, always something changing, even though you had a schedule. And then, you'd be free for the night. You had to be in bed by 11, and then you couldn't get out of the apartment or out of bed until roughly about 6
in the morning.
o'clock.
Couldn't leave or whatever. Yeah.
Let me tell you this. I'm gonna jump into this with saying, like, I detested this amount of rule following in the morning, and specifically my second year, he was a complete, just absent-minded leader. And again, I know he's only a year older than me, probably, right? And I could probably find him on Facebook and be like, hey dude, but like at the time, like, power goes to people's heads, and especially
it really does.
especially when it's mandated by God, right? Like you chose to be here. God brought you here. God brought you back for a second year. So of course you need to lead these first years with whatever your version of authority is. Well, what if their version of authority is unempathetic iron fist? Did you ever think about that?
Yeah.
Do you ever consider that you're bringing people who have different ways of living their life, and now you're making them live under this roof with this person who has never had maybe a sibling, and they're having to guide you through as if like you're a child? Which again, no, you're not a child. You're an adult. No, wait, you're not an adult. You are this young, moldable
Yeah. Because
disciple.
even if you had like a cold or you're sick or something, they acted like it was the end of the world for you to miss something, for you to not be there. And it's like, what are we even doing anyway?
They had this saying. They said, "You don't call in, you crawl in." Is what they used to say. You don't call in, you crawl in. And even if you have like the flu and you could infect other people, they need to physically see it and go, all right, well, that you can go home.
Yeah.
Or you go to the apartment, or whatever. And it's like that to me. And again, in that version of Gavin, where I was very career focused, I'm like, well, yeah, you got to be intense. You can't be a little bitch. You got to come in every day. I'm like, okay. Like I look back at that again. If I read it in my journals, I'd probably hate myself. So,
because I was just like, this is dumb. There's nothing that is that important that Susie needs to be over here sneezing next to me with a fever with the flu. So now I'm sick. Like there's nothing that we don't need to be doing any of that.
I don't know.
You're so tired. Like you're
all
so tired.
All the time. I don't know if you guys got a day off. We always had at least one day off. We had, I think it was Fridays. We had Fridays off. But then
we had one day.
Yeah.
We had one day,
yeah. So as I've thought about it, and even as I reflect a little more critically, even being there, like it's hard not to see that Master's Commission within a church, whatever church it may have been, was just a attempt to be a money-making tool, right? Like, was there not a huge emphasis put on recruitment? I don't know about y'all, but we were all about recruitment. So that also meant, like, let's say a group of us go to Taco Bell. You better believe we're about to get a talking to about how to present yourselves, because you never know who's going to come up and talk to you and want to be involved with what we're doing. And I'm like, oh, of course.
Nobody wants to talk to you at Taco Bell. They are trying to get their food and
get the hell out.
Home. That's
absolutely.
It. That's
or
it.
walking around Walmart, and this is big.
The Walmart thing, Lord, I detested like outreach. Detested. People are busy. Why are you how do you expect somebody to sit and have a 20-minute conversation with you at Walmart?
Dude.
Like that.
Insane.
Does that even make logical sense to you?
No, even then I was not even on board with that, because I was like, this is not the kind of, even wanting to go into ministry, this is not the kind of ministry that I wanted to do.
Right.
All right. I'm not, if I don't have the money to pay for this woman's groceries that I'm bothering, why am I going to bother her and stop her stop her from just going on with her freaking day? But yeah, just that image of, or that language of like always being watched, right? And again, that goes back to being watched by other students, being watched by pastoral staff, and then now it's being watched by random citizens who may want to join this program, and so we got to make sure that we're our best representation. And I'm like, let's do a census real quick. My class was about 40 people. Out of the 40 people, did you see somebody at McDonald's and go, I want to do what they're doing? So this is completely unrealistic scenario they're painting to make sure that you are this perfect little Christian boy or girl.
Right.
Obviously not sitting together, not Christian boys and girls sitting together, but in that you're representing Crossroads, the church, and Crossroads, the program, to the best of your ability.
Right, exactly. What did you guys have for like punishments if people broke the rules or failed tests, or weren't living their life the way they felt like they should be?
So I had to think about this, because I remember you mentioned that on the stacks. So I really had to think about it. They did like they did a 3 strikes kind of deal. And then there was like, okay, I say that. And then there was like, there's people that was like 1 strike, you're out kind of deal. And those people were the ones who were like, definitely like sleeping together their first year, and they were out. All right. None of that. And then there's another guy who was like stealing money from another student, which I'm like, that to me, that's reasonable.
Right.
But the rest of it would be like, okay, well, discipline. It was like going in earlier than prayer and working. So there was
Yeah,
a
we had 5
janitorial
a.m.s.
there was a janitorial team at Crossroads, and so they would do work. They would clean, they would mop, they would do whatever, or it was oh Jesus, being excluded from things. So like if there was an event or if there was a special person coming in to speak, like it was like they were put away, like, okay, you don't get to
Yeah, you can't be.
participate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
your
and
heart's
then
not in the right place.
yeah, correct. If you, yeah, dude, the heart in the not right place, bro. It's right here. It's in the same place. You can't. I can't move it. Sorry about that. The punishment for like failing a test, scripture tests. I believe it was like you just gotta take it over and over and over until you get it right. I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
We had every week we had to learn a passage of scripture and memorize
Correct.
it and then write it down.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it would be maybe 10 verses or something, like that. And so you have to do it verbatim. I think we could have like 3 errors or something like that with it or whatever.
We did. So if there's a 4-week month, which most are, it's one verse for 3 weeks, and then the 4th week was all 3 verses
all of
combined.
them. Yeah.
So you had to like remember the passage. So yeah, and it was usually themed around what they were trying to teach or whatever. So that way there was like some of that recollection of like what is being said or whatever. But yeah, I got in trouble about 3 separate occasions to where they were like, we're really on the verge of kicking you out. We're really on the verge. And one was for, again, so Master's Commission, no matter how the size of your program is not a big program, right? Again, I said we had 40 students. For a master's, that's kind of large, but in the grand scheme of like a college or just a normal school, it's 40 people. There's more people, again, at the Taco Bell, okay, than there are in my first year program. And we were doing, a part of our recruitment was doing productions. So we were not focused on human videos. They had moved beyond human videos. They did these really elaborate productions. And so I was a part of the production. I was a character. And I had just been, friends with other cast members who, surprise, were female. And, while a part of the scene is happening, we're sitting next to each other. And because we were sitting next to each other,
probably
talking,
look too happy. And
let me tell you what, that right there was like my biggest issue. And people at the time would say, well, it's because you're lustful, Gavin. You don't know how to be a true male presence, so you gravitate towards women. And I'm like, first of all, what? No. I have friends that are dudes, my roommates. I mean, we're cool, but like, I'm not seeking out female attention.
Right.
We're on the stage. It's literally in the middle of the 3rd act. I'm about to go back on, chill your ass, but, and then there was like, really the 3 times I was threatened to be kicked out was because of talking to girls.
Yeah.
And again, even as I'm saying it, I'm like, in the context of Masters, that's so normal. But here I am 12 years later, and I'm like, why did I not just say, kick me out? Because that is fucking insane. Like, we're just people. And I know that the rules established, again, the covenant, we've mentioned the covenant before, that's the covenant to not date. The fact that they extend that to a covenant to not be friends. Yeah. You can't even speak. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Accidentally brushing against their shoulder while you're walking in a hallway and a second year sees it. Jesus Christ, Lord. I mean, you may as well go to hell right then.
Right. Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, I felt like an outlier in my first year a lot because of those reasons, because of my upbringing and where I come from, like just the big city, and then also my career focus. I wanted to be a pastor. I was not here to, and again, that was another thing that got me in trouble was because I literally told one of my roommates, I said, him and I got a huge fight, which if you don't fight with your roommates in masters, what are you even doing? Okay. I was fighting with my roommate and I was like, I'm not, he was talking to me about what a good friend he's been to me for something. And I was like, I am not here to be friends with you. I am here for a career in ministry. And if you can't handle that, like, then we don't need to be talking to each other. And I got in trouble for that because I was degrading and demeaning. And I'm like, I didn't even call him a bitch, which I wanted to. I wanted to say, like, you're a bitch, but I couldn't,
the way I wanted to cuss people out.
My second year, I definitely had a looser tongue, and that also got me in trouble. But
So when towards the end of your first year, how did they get you? How did they get you on the hook to wanna come back? Because you have to apply, and stuff, and then be like accepted back, like it's some.
That to me is so manipulative, and you even your tone even knows it's manipulative. Absolutely, they need the numbers. They need the money. Because another part of this, in case you didn't know, like how the network works, is that Masters Commission International will subsidize some of your salaries for your employees, depending on the number of students you can bring in, right? In case that's not been talked about. So there is this whole network of programs, right? So these programs are trying to get students to come back and trying to get them to come. So yes, I had to be asked to come back. I had to fill out this long ass survey that was basically like the admission sheet all over again, just like what did you do during your first year? I'm like, I was cranking in the bathtub, but I was also 18 years old. All right, like give me a break. I couldn't talk to girls.
I actually literally did nothing. Probably had an attitude and hated all of you, but when I say I literally did nothing, what? Like
yeah, absolutely. I may have lied and said I journaled 3 days out of the week instead of the mandated 4 days. I apologize for that.
I had my second year tell on me in my house because she didn't see me studying.
Jesus.
And I was like, I study in my room, probably when it's quiet and nobody's really around. And it was the most ridiculous thing. And I just remember, like, I can't do anything right. No, like, y'all really are just on people for no reason. And why can't you come speak to me about it?
Yeah.
Why do you have to then take it to one of our like leaders, and now we're having a meeting, and it's like this whole thing,
Yes. My second year, him and I never ever saw eye to eye ever up until graduation day, and it was like that we had multiple arguments and disagreements, and he was always narking on me, and I'm like, bro, I sleep above you, bro. We have bunk beds. Just fucking talk to me, dude.
Right.
And he wouldn't. He couldn't or wouldn't, and man, that was brutal. But yeah, so second year, they have you fill out, and again with the pitch of you can get your bachelor's in 2 years, they also make that a part of it, where it's like, of course you want to come back to finish your leadership degree and get your non-accredited bachelor's. Right. So again, as part of my desire was like, well, of course. Now, I did do a little, like, I was like, let me try to have some control here. So I go home for the summer. I was getting texts from my other first year roommates, and they were like, oh, they're inviting people back, which, by the way, I know you mentioned it, maybe, I think, which is that in the summer you still have to abide by the rules to a degree. I don't know if you guys did that, but like they were like, we really encourage you during the summer not to gather in places with women or opposite sex, and don't get tattoos in the summer. Yeah. And all that stuff. So my first year, my other first year members were texting me like, oh my God, they're calling people. They're inviting them back. So that day I was waiting. It was middle of summer, middle of June. And the director calls me and he's like, hey, I'm sure you know why we're calling you. We want to invite you back for a second year in leadership position and to finish out your bachelor's degree. And I go, well, I am interested still, but I would like to know what happened to the other master's commission program that was in our city that you said not to Google. Because in Lafayette, there used to be 2 master's commissions. There's Crossroads Masters, and there was Masters 3D, which their names, Lord help them. And he got so quiet. Like, it was like I had just unveiled this adultery.
Right.
And he goes, well, there's some very bitter people. Again, the whole spiel. There's some very bitter people who left the program, and after it shut down, they found their voice and have not stopped talking about it. And I'm like, okay, but can you tell me what happened, right? So if they're bitter, what caused them to leave? And then what caused the program to shut down,
Right,
right?
right.
And really large non-answer of, well, the time had come for that program to go, and we knew that our program was supposed to be the one that stayed. Come to find out. So fast forward many years later when I'm like, let me just get around to Googling this myself, because I accepted that. I was like, okay, sure, I'll come back. But come to find out that there was a lot of, and if we need a trigger warning here, but there was a lot of sexual abuse of students and a lot of physical abuse of students who, I know I talk a lot about, like, yeah, we were doing physical labor and sure, we were cleaning the church, but I will give Crossroads some credit that they did try to make it a program where you were doing things to learn and not just
And not physical labor. Yeah.
and not just exert yourself. I know of master's programs. I know of people who've
Right.
come out of programs where all they did was
work.
set up chairs, set up the baptistry, clean, vacuum, and they paid to go do that. And that's what this other program in Lafayette was. So yeah, I kind of was like, I don't know if I'm going to come back because you didn't tell me the whole truth, And then I went back, So yeah, second year.
How did you find the second year? I mean, for me, it was just a horrific experience, but being now in charge of other people and having to even like bend the knee more.
Yeah. Okay, so interesting to use that analogy, because for me, I made the decision, and some of my other first year friends, we had all said, we want to be led the way, we want to lead the way we wished we were led.
Right.
A lot of us came out of it like with these experiences of these really incompetent and unempathetic narc leaders. And so there was the moments of other, let's say, third years and staff members being like, hey, I saw so-and-so. Can you go talk to them? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go talk to them. I didn't go talk to them.
No.
I was like, hey, I want to let you know right now that, like, I've got your back. Please be careful because I don't want you to get in trouble. And I know in the inverse for some leaders, it's, I don't want to get in trouble.
Right,
so I'm going to talk to you.
Right.
I've already been in trouble. I was threatened to get kicked out.
And for me, it would be like, hey, I don't think you're doing anything, but just so you know, this is how people are taking what you're doing.
100%.
Take it or leave it, fix it or not. This is how they're taking it. Is it stupid? I'm not going to say, but, here we are.
And that's the case. That's exactly it. It's like, I am not here. Again, are we adults? Are we young adults? Are we children? What are we? So then now being, like you said, the leadership position, I'm like, I tried my best. And I don't have a relationship with the first years that were in my apartment, but I think that's just because of life. We really did leave on a really nice term. It was like, hey, they didn't come back for a second year, whatever. But my second year was, again, focused on, I'm trying to accomplish this one thing and get my bachelor's and get out. I also, and you mentioned this, I also ended up dating a girl in my second year, and she ended up being my first wife. And that is a whole nother aspect of Master's Commission, which is the marry fucking young.
Man.
It's and maybe not even Master specific. It's church. It's Assemblies of God.
Yeah.
It's
it
evangelical.
Assemblies of God, definitely.
Yeah.
We had like wife class. Last thing I cared about, and you had to you want to be chaste,
Yes.
You want the man to come chase you. You need to be humble and meek, and you need to be seeking a husband, not just looking to date people. I'm like,
dude,
how do you
language.
go from you can't date? How do you go from you can't talk to boys?
Talk.
Like I smiled at somebody. What are you smiling at? You go from that to now you need to be looking for a husband or a wife.
Yes. That's the level of extreme. If you think about it even further into how the evangelical church pitches purity culture, right? Like, it's like, if you're dating, no sex, you get married, 0 to 100, you better know how to have sex and have children, right? So going into a second year, it's, I didn't talk to, wasn't supposed to be having these conversations with women or girls or whatever. And then I was like, yeah, you can date, and you better be this man of God
intentional
boyfriend.
about it.
Yes. Have
Vulnerable
yourself
and
ready.
open.
So yeah, a part of my journey in my second year was that with my girlfriend at the time, we were dating for, and again, I'm like laughing at this, which is we were dating for 2 months. And then I look at her. So this would have been probably December of that year, 2012. And I go, hey, just so you know, my goal is to be a pastor after this. And I think that we'd make a really great power couple. How many times you heard that fucking word? We'd make a great power couple. So like, I think that if we do this right, we can get married in the
There's
summer.
so much pressure at
Dude.
every angle because
Yes.
everything has to be this like moment and this big
Yes.
intentional thing where it's like we're just hanging out, or you know.
Yeah. So I literally, like you're talking about, I mean, you're talking about moments, right? So like the dates we would have. So we had 1 day a week where we could go date. The rest of the time we could be seen together, but we couldn't be holding hands.
Right.
We couldn't kiss. We couldn't hug for too long. We could text as much as we wanted, but we only had 1 day to date. Guess what we did when we went to go date? We would go have Bible studies. we would go to cafes and just crack open the Word of God. Because again, you're talking about these moments and you're trying to showcase that you're this growing and learning and vessel. And, you know, I mean, eventually that died out. That was probably like the first,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I remember going on a date with a guy
months.
and he didn't want to go on another date with me because he said that I didn't talk about God. And I was like, I'm literally in a church all day.
Oh,
all
dude.
Day.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even remember what we talked about, but I was like, it was just such a normal, like, you know, conversation or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy.
And the ongoing conversations during your second year, at least for us, especially for those who were dating, was, oh, who's going to get married first? Who's going to get married first? Who's going to have children first? Who's going to do this first? And again, it's like, it's about the moments and the milestones of like showing that you're this successful, you did it, right? Like ring by spring kind of moment.
Yeah.
And it's like, looking back, it's so like that right there. That is, in my opinion, some of the largest culty things about it is like the controlling of the narrative of relationships, the controlling of the idea of marriage to that level of degree where these people, these young people, like at my wedding, you mentioned it, I couldn't even drink.
Right.
I couldn't even drink at my wedding. Not that we would have had alcohol, by the way, because we were God-fearing people, but we couldn't even drink. And to have that expectation and have that be a bedrock, right? Like that's like a bedrock of understanding of being in master's commission for 2 or more years. Like, yeah, if you're going to date, you better hurry up and get married because you don't want to have this illusion that you're dating for too long and you might be sleeping together.
Right.
Blah, 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 blah.
Because because of purity culture, you don't want to sin. So then people go into these fast marriages and they don't know each other, but people are horny and, you know, they don't want to sin. So they get married just to have sex. And I saw so many people get married because of or get married because they had sex. Yeah. And I had a really good friend in masters who did that. And I remember years later her just telling me, she was like, it was the worst mistake of my life. You know, they ended up staying married, going through counseling, doing whatever. But she was like, I should have never even had to go through all that. Like, you know,
the expectation from this cloud of rules and objectivity, like you have to be this certain way. I mean, it's you know, for me, again, wanting to be in ministry, like how many single pastors do you know? Or did you know?
Right.
Probably 0 to none.
Because you can barely get hired as a pastor if you're not married, though.
Boom. Exactly. So pitching that and saying like, oh, we could be this power couple, that's absolutely transactional. And yes, so like full disclosure, like, I mean, like I said, that's my first wife, right? So there were feelings for sure. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like, I loved her. We went through masters together. We did our first and second year. We really met our second year. But like, there was a lot of it I look back on, and especially going into my career into ministry, 100% transaction. Like 100%, like we did this because I needed the job. And that blew up.
You got to be a wife.
That blew up. in a really dramatic fashion that fucking blew up.
And
So
they would try to
yes.
put people together,
Yes.
a lot of times. And I think that was one of the things that I thought was like super culty was we think you guys should get together, and people would do it.
Yeah.
And I would be
Mm-hmm.
like, that is
Mm-mm.
crazy.
Psycho. And again, like, if you're talking about like the language, like, don't say, if there's if you're in masters and you joke that you're a cult, it's just joking, right? Because of course, to somebody who went straight into college has no idea what this is like, so of course they think this is a cult.
Right,
But
exactly.
then if you take those things seriously, then it's like, hey man, you're being really dramatic and you're being very analytical of what God's doing and what God's plan for this program and these people are. Like, don't. And honestly, that aspect of it is probably what kept me for a long time, just like not really saying anything, because I mean, there are people I know that are in ministry. I mean, I went into ministry eventually, not anymore, but I was. So I mean, they're bad things can bad thing do good things sometime. I don't
Right,
know,
right.
and uh it's awful. It's awful, very culty.
When did you first think that you were in a cult?
um I think going into my second year was probably much more like visible to me, because again, I want to like stand on my own business, which is I did choose to be there. I paid the money. I had wanted to go for my first year. The second year, where you're then elevated, but then you're brought into conversations like that they're having about how they're kind of socially maneuvering people. I'm like, and they're like, no, the Holy Spirit's guiding us. I'm like, is it, or are we trying to be
You
start
saw the
start start?
manipulation behind the curtain.
I remember a very specific moment. So they when we were in first year, they told us, before you ever got here, when you applied, we printed out pictures of you and we prayed for you, and then God told us who your roommates needed to be. Then I come back for a second year. I'm one of like 3 people that gets brought into this room. So most of my first year came back for a second year. So there was probably like 35 of us. Out of 35, like 3 or 4 of us got selected to come be part of the room selection process. Little to no praying. And it was very much like, this person said that they're passive aggressive. Let's put them with this person who has no backbone. That sounds like a good match. Boink. And they put them in a room together. Or this person has a very short temper, and this person says they talk too much. Oh, that's going to make a really great room. Boink.
Yeah. They had looked us up on like social media and stuff, and I
Yes.
remember somebody had said something about me on mine, like, "Oh, you look like you were trouble," or like,
Ugh,
whatever. And I just
what the
remember
hell?
being so hurt by that, and
What is that
like,
even supposed to mean?
damn, you didn't even know me. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
I'm a teenager. Like, what are you
Yes.
even, talking about and stuff? And it was, yeah, it was so much of it was crazy. And when you see behind the veil of
Mm-hmm.
as a second year, and I'm sure as a third year as
Oh, man.
well,
Yeah.
and people do say, well, you chose to be here, you chose to come
Yes.
back,
Yeah.
but it's so manipulative that
Yes.
I almost felt like I didn't have another choice. It was almost, they were
Yeah.
like, well, what are you gonna do? Like, I
Yeah.
couldn't
Yeah.
possibly do anything else, and it was, you feel pigeonholed,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to do what God is telling you to do, so you
Mm-hmm.
think God's telling them to tell you, so you're doing it.
Yes, and there is that level of looking down on the people who didn't come back, right? Like, so again, that manipulation of vantage point, right? Like telling you what to see, right? Like,
Mhm.
this is what you're supposed to see in them. Like, well, they left. Yeah, it's not because they couldn't afford it. No, of course not. It's because they didn't want to grow anymore,
Right,
or
right.
they really wanted to return back to their life in sin, and da 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 da. And it's like, I mean, I don't know. I talked to them. I talked to them over the summer. They seemed pretty happy that they weren't coming
Right,
back.
right.
Maybe I'm the one
Like,
that's
they're
wrong. I don't know.
fine. Yeah.
Again, a part of the cultiness of it as well boils down to like the immense amount of favor shown to very specific talented students, and nepotism. I don't know if your program had anybody that was related to other people that were on staff. I did. I had children of certain people, and I had brothers and sisters of certain people that were in my first and second year in kind of like orbit. They got on every trip. They went
Right.
on to every missions trip. They got invited to the special things. They didn't have to do the work. Or if we were all, let's say, cleaning, we had to
They
clean the
got to go do
bus.
something else. And
We just got called. We got to go do this thing, That
Mhm.
to me, like that level of complete blatant disregard for 99% of the other people who also paid to be here, by the way.
Right, right.
That to me screamed like creating, like forcing division
And
to
there was
where
just
it,
no empathy,
no,
and
I
I
don't
and
think
I
so.
didn't understand that.
No.
There was no love. There was no like, you're having a rough day, or you're sick, or like your dad's sick, you need to go home, or you're stressed out because you don't have any money. I completely understand that. There was never any like give for that, you
Yeah.
know. And it was so manipulated to like, well, you're not trusting God to provide for you, and it's like, I don't have a job. I'm
Yeah.
here. That's a natural thing to be stressed about. How am I going to eat? How am I going to feed myself?
Yes.
People were
Oh,
just dumpster diving, where
yes.
we were. People dumpster, and it was like this whole
Hmm.
thing. I told my mom, I mentioned a dumpster diving one time, and she started crying
Yeah.
because she did not know. And I said, girl, I did not do it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just be hungry, like
Yeah.
whatever. But I saw that, and people
Yeah.
would do it, and it was crazy to me. And then, staff members are going out to lunch every day, or,
Yep.
ordering
Yep.
out or driving nice cars. And,
Yep.
and then the people that they like, those people are getting taken out to lunch.
They get to go too. That's
They
right.
get to go
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
They get to go over the staff member's house to go to dinner when you're trying to figure out your peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yep. Yep.
Like it was just so unfair, and you couldn't say that
Nope.
because you just look jealous and bitter and angry. And
No. And then we, especially with that, like there's this idea, especially with it being a Christian ministry, it's like, well, God's moving in this, so they're favored, and favor isn't fair. I cannot tell you how many times I heard favor isn't fair, and I wanted to just jump off a bridge. Like, it's 1 minute, oh, we're all God's favorites. It's great, and then the next moment, yeah, I'm having a hard time because I haven't eaten breakfast for the past 6 days, but so and so gets to go home. Again, I'm from Dallas. I cannot go home. I don't even have a goddamn car, but so
right,
and so gets to go down the street and they take so and so people with them. Well, favor ain't fair. I'm like, is it favor to have a meal? Is it favor for a basic human right? I, I
right.
don't I don't know. Let's ask the American church. Is it favor to have a basic human right? Oh, you're silent. Okay, thank you. So yeah, that to me, again. So you asked, when did I really start feeling it? I think the chips started happening beginning of second year. I did the full second year, and let me tell you this again, leaning into like the creating a narrative for you. This was during Obama's second term election.
Mm,
They sat us all down 3 days before the election,
I can't even imagine.
and we watched this documentary. It was a movie. It's a real movie. You can go look it up. Don't, but you can look it up. And it's called Obama's America. And it's all about how he really wasn't born here and how his goals are to completely destroy the church. Not even destroy America specifically, just destroy the church, because we're all victimized by being Christians, the number one
Right, right.
religion in the world. Okay. Um, it's all about how he's trying to bring satanic worship into the public square,
Oh my
how he's
god.
a communist puppet from China or maybe Africa or maybe Russia. We don't really know, but and people took this like it was the gospel itself. And I remember I this is me confessing. So if I ever run for office, don't hold this against me, okay? I didn't file an absentee ballot that year, so I didn't get to vote in that election. But I sure as hell wasn't going to vote for whoever the Republican candidate was at the time. I think it was probably Mitt Romney. I was not voting for him, and then I couldn't do anything else. So, but yeah, I know other people that were like, that was so, again, with the current state of politics, that's mild, right? Like with the current
Right.
state of the
Right.
church's integration of
Mhm.
politics, that shit is mild. But even back then, I was like, what is this? Why are we talking about this? Why are you sitting 45, or I guess it would probably be that 50 or so people, and telling them, you have to watch, this is the truth? What is wrong? What does that have to do with the
And
Bible? What does that have
people
to do with
wouldn't
studying?
think for themselves. They wouldn't look
No.
things up. They wouldn't. And there are so many times I would tell people, like, this isn't true. Like, this
Yes.
literally is not true.
Yeah.
Please look it up. Like,
Yeah.
it's not true. Nobody's
Yeah.
doing that. It's not, whatever. And it was just so crazy. And I felt like so much stuff they demonized was who I was. And
Like a targeted,
yeah, and for me that was a very like hard thing, because I was like, my personality, my characteristics aren't going to
yeah.
change, and you're
Yes.
listing off things that I feel like are who I am,
Yeah.
and I was like, it's a church's job to be kind and to help people and to support people, and we're not doing that.
Yeah. It's like, what's funny, it's so funny, because let's say someone like you in any way, shape, or form comes in and attends on a Sunday, they would go, we love that she's here. We love her exactly who she is. We love her for all of everything she brings. But because you signed up for this specific thing, even though you are in every way, shape, or form exactly who they want to come in, walk through those doors, you are now completely obsolete as to who
Mm-hmm.
you are, and your ability to turn and be a certain way, or speak a certain way, or dress a certain way, is all called into question. When in reality, anybody that looks like you or me, they'd be glad that walks into those doors.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
because we signed up for this thing and we're questioning, or you're bucking up against, it's like, well, you've got a rebellious spirit. I cannot tell you how many rebellious
Yeah.
spirits I had in me. I had enough to fill the goddamn Bible with. I had so many
Me
rebellious
too.
spirits. So
And it was just because we asked questions,
yeah.
So how did you kind of get like on your deconstruction journey? I
Yeah.
didn't start like after I was kicked out, I literally put it over here. It
Yeah.
was gone. It was out of my mind, out of sight. I have friends that I had for years who never heard me talk about it. Who never.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, my phone rang.
You're good.
And so it took me until honestly like 2019, 2020 to really start my whole deconstruction process. I was out of the church right after masters or whatever. So,
Yep.
but I never sat and processed it, and really it
Yeah.
was like, this really fucked me up for a
Yeah.
long time.
I relate to what you said on the other podcast. You said that like you got kicked out, which congratulations, you are in the Hall of Fame of Masters Commission. You got kicked out.
Woo woo.
I unfortunately didn't get kicked out. I was a good little boy. I graduated. Fuck, did a third year, and then I was on staff. Oh yeah, but you said you got kicked out, and then like you like just went and lived your life. You went and just partied and did whatever you wanted. I'm like, I don't blame you at all. Like, can you imagine the amount of oppression that probably just felt like just got lifted off of you?
It
Like,
did, but then there was this guilt that still would just seep in sometimes,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I would just feel like, what if I'm wrong? Or still
yeah,
feeling bad
yeah,
about things. I'm divorced, and even though
yeah,
I had been out the church for a really long time, I had so much guilt around my divorce and wanting to get out of an abusive relationship and a terrible
yeah.
marriage that I never knew I had still. Like, I didn't know that it was still in there. But I was
Yeah,
like, wow, this is kind of running deep. And I got divorced in 2019, and I think when those feelings started really like coming up and stuff, that's when I really started going through my deconstruction process of like, wow, I really need to like work on this.
yeah. So I did my second year, third year, did staff, and then I went on and was a youth pastor at a church in Baton Rouge for a while. that church ended up closing down, and then I moved back to Dallas, where I ended up working at a mega church, which is like every master's commission kid
Dream, right.
dream is to work at a mega church. Okay. And I got hired on to be the youth pastor or a youth pastor. And this church, I would label as culturally progressive and maybe even theologically progressive, but it's still an AG church. They just don't like have a lot of the traditional AG practices. They use the covering of AG for like
Right.
probably like a tax loophole.
Mhm.
But the culture at the time, from what I experienced, was very progressive. Pretty much from that moment when I landed at this church, and I would tell people about how I ended up there and really like my journey into ministry and ministry training. A lot of people would respond not with the reaction of like, wow, that's awesome. Like, that sounds like a really cool thing you did. They'd be like, you did that? Or people said that to you? Or
Right.
you spent money to do that? And that was probably the first time I ever started to question. And that was in summer of 2016 is when I landed at the mega church in Dallas, and completely started to reform not just my theology, but then also like reform my thoughts on like what I had gone through
Right.
up
Because they
until this
tell
point.
you not to talk about it. They tell you,
Yeah,
don't try to explain masters to people because people aren't going to
bro.
understand. So if you try to
Is that
explain
not
it,
what cults say? Is that not
literally,
what they
and they
say?
say, well, you try to explain it, it's just going to like be weird and they're going to think it's weird and, da 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 da. So you probably did the same thing I did where you just never really actually explained it. And the first person you did, they're like, that's not okay.
And especially at the church I ended up at, their culture was a lot about hiring people who attended that church for a long time. So they did not have formal training, which did I
Right.
even? I don't know, but I paid for it, And so for a lot of them, they're like, oh no, I just attended this church for a long time, gained favor, got hired. So to hear that I paid to go to this thing in another state, couldn't have a job, didn't talk to girls, got in trouble, was up at 6 a.m., cleaning a bus, da 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 da. They're like, what the actual fuck? So
Right.
through 2016, 2017, about 2018 is when my marriage started to fall apart. And largely because of I was 100% dedicated to my career, right? I was a pastor at a mega church. You do not work normal hours, right?
No.
It is at beck and call.
And they
And I
tell you to
know,
get married, but then also the church has to be number one.
boom, you're married to
And
the
that's
church.
not gonna work for a lot of people.
There are people that are going to hear me say this if they ever listen to that, and who may have been on staff at that church and say, "Well, we never told you. We never told you to stay here till 8 o'clock. We never told you to be here." And I'm like,
With
"Yeah, but
words.
if I didn't, I would have been fired. If I didn't, I would have been questioned for my integrity. If I didn't, I'd be questioned for my authenticity or value to the church or whatever the fuck." And so, my first marriage, I had a kid. We had a kid. Something I always tell people when I talk about this journey is, as I have really looked back on it all, is like I literally, because of how dedicated I was to the church, I have really little to no memory of the first year of my son's life.
Wow.
I was not around. I would get up before he was awake, and I'd come back right as he was being put to bed.
Yeah.
And on the weekends, I'm studying, I'm working, I'm texting the pastor, we're meeting up for coffee, I'm trying to meet with congregants. And so in 2018, my wife at the time, to me, was a surprise because she was like, I'm done. But to her, this was probably like good 2 years of, what are you doing? Like, why are you not involved with us? And I'm like, my involvement with the church, again, listen to this language, because to other people who don't grow up in this sounds completely crazy. But to me, it's like, to me, I go, me working for the church is me working on us. Me working for God is working for us. So you saying I'm not here for you doesn't make sense to me. It didn't compute to my freaking
Right.
tiny mind. And her and I both, like I said, we were in masters together. So we had both had those moments of conversations with people of being like, that was not normal what you went through. How is your marriage even normal? Like
Right,
that's
right, yeah.
real conversations we had with people.
Even friendships, and I
Yes.
remember even hearing people talk about friendships, and I remember being like so kind of disgusted by people because I'm like, your best friend is mad at you because you've been here for 6 months and you haven't called them. That's
Yeah.
weird. Why?
Yeah.
That's not
Mm-hmm.
okay. Like, you still
Yep.
need to have these normal relationships and normal friendships, and
Yep.
in a healthy way, and it just
Yeah.
never was.
Nope. Never was in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, as we've mentioned a billion times by now, was absolutely discouraged and if not downright punished for trying to contact not only the outside world, but maybe even people that they would have identified as hurtful to your walk
Right.
with God, right? If they had the knowledge of who these people may have been in your life. So yeah, so fast forward again. So we're at the end of my marriage in 2019, and that's really probably the tipping point. I in most through therapy, loads of it. That's usually where I pinpoint like the inciting incident of like fully waking up to what the fuck have I been doing? Like for the past 10 years almost.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
going from high school straight into marriage to working and grinding in church to having a kid to a divorce in the span of really probably less than 10 years. And I ended up working at this church until 2020. December of 2020, I was ceremoniously let go, which was also a really shitty thing because, even though I deemed this church as progressive in some ways,
Mhm.
they were still a church. And so, like, there was aspects to it that were very shady. And so I ended up being let go in December of 2020. And so going into 2021 was the first time in a very long time, close to a decade. I mean, for 2021, I started master's in 2011, so 10 years of not having anything to do with ministry. And it was almost like I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And I think that also was a pinpoint of like, you have been so in a cult, you don't even freaking understand it. Like,
Mhm.
and not just the cult of Master's Commission, but the cult of ministry. I think there are many aspects to how a lot of churches operate that are very cult like. And they wouldn't say that because it's just church culture. It's just, working
Right.
for the
Right.
pastor and all these things you give up for this job. But what other job that has a decent culture anyway would ask you to give up
Right.
anything? I know you went to the military. I know you know what it's like to give up things, but that is a part of that job. But working at a church is not working for the goddamn military.
Right. Right.
But they act like it. They act like they're that important. And so going into 2021, I ended up remarrying in this time to an amazing person, amazing woman. I love her so much. She's gonna listen. She's gonna listen to this. Shout out, love you. Um, um, but even our journey together in both relationship and engagement, all this stuff was marred by maybe some things that I carried on from how I acted or was deep rooted into me from Master's Commission of how a husband is supposed to be. Well, if I got it right, if I had the right model the first time, why did I get a divorce?
Right.
Or if Master's Commission does so much good and helping all, like, why are all these people that were in my class that also got married also divorced now?
Right.
Like,
Right.
yeah, I know you mentioned that so many people that you know were married within X amount of time of leaving Masters, ended up getting divorced within 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's like the sweet spot. 3 to 5 years after Master's Commission of getting married, you're getting a divorce. That's like chef's kiss, sweet spot right there. And so since then, not being in the church, not really being affiliated with a religious organization, considering myself more spiritual, God loves everybody, Jesus loves everybody, and whatever you want to fucking do with your life, he's going to let you fucking do it, and he loves you for that. He loves you for who you are. I can't see that being in any way, shape, or form conform to any standard of what a church or a program like Master's Commission would allow there to be, right? Because there is so much level of control over like God as this overbearing kingly figure or father, like whatever you needed him to be at the time, whatever authoritarian figure
And
God needed to be to you.
Into
Exactly. Like the image of Jesus as this conqueror, or image of Jesus as this peacemaker, or whatever he needed to be for that teaching moment is exactly what he was, to make sure that you understood your place. And
Right.
again, those things I carried with me for a very, very long time. A very long time.
Right. Wow. That is, yeah. And I still feel that way. There's still times I feel like it trickles in through things. And, and I feel like we're all just trying to do the best we can. And to me, just being kind and empathetic to people and loving people and letting people live their life,
Yes.
leave people alone.
And it's so funny you said leave people alone, right? Because since leaving ministry altogether, I'm not very, as of literally last week, I'm not very active on social media. I took TikTok and Instagram off my phone or whatever, but I used to be very outspoken. As soon as I realized that like nobody can control what I say anymore, I was like a fucking rabid fox on Instagram. I'm like, the church is corrupt. Fuck Trump. Free, all oppressed people. The U.S. war
Yeah.
machine wants to kill. I'm saying all these things, and I can't tell you how many alumni from masters slid into my DMs and saying things like, there are students who used to pastor who follow you. You are going to lead them astray. And I'm like, bitch, you haven't talked to me. First of all, you didn't even hit me up when I was going through my divorce. So why
Right.
you want to talk?
Thank you.
You want to?
Who are
You
you?
still want to? Again, we want to talk about the policing. These are people I had little to no connection with, even in masters, hitting me up close to 10 years later going, that's not really a Christian thing to say. I'm like, bitch, define a Christian. And then we can go from there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, what are you talking about? So yeah, absolutely. Like, there's so much that I think even with people who have left the program and maybe went on to live like a normal Christian life, like who don't realize that attitude is
it's still in there.
absolutely seared deep into them. And that right there is like is such a toxic and manipulative way that I think that they just get you for generations. I know that there's just people that are living their life thinking that like that was a normal experience, and now I'm living my life with these memories of like how to police people, or how to talk to people, or how to. And I'm like, how many of these Masters alumni across all MCIN, whatever, like how many of them are actually in ministry, and how many of them are actually fulfilled with their life?
Right.
I would say less than 1% on both fronts.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No. Yeah. I guess we've been talking for like almost an hour and a half now.
I just saw that.
Yeah. But I guess I would say, do you have what would you say to somebody who's still in it?
Google. No. Honestly, so if anybody that is in the program, and nowadays, I'm sure you've seen this too, they've started labeling themselves as leadership colleges.
Yes.
Because they know that the terms Master's Commission
Well,
do
and
not
Cult
have.
101, whenever you change your name, I already know something shady happened. I don't know what it is, but I know it happened. So every time people do these name changes, I'm like, what happened?
Yes. So if you find yourself in a leadership college or a Master's Commission, my encouragement to you really is to, number one, as best as you can, think critically about normal interactions. Okay. And I mean that in like a non-demeaning way. I literally mean like, if you were an employee at a store, at Best Buy, would you treat somebody the way that they're telling you to treat the other person that you are in this program with? If the answer is no, then there is something severely wrong with the way they are telling you to treat people.
Wow, that's such a good way to put it.
The baseline of how I feel Masters has been very manipulative, again, like I mentioned quite a few times on here, is how to interact with other people, like policing them or keeping them accountable.
Because people would talk to you crazy, and there were so many times I'd be like, "You can't talk to me like that.
Yes,
you will not.
Yeah.
You will not.
Yeah,
and
using the authority of God as a rod to strike you with, rather than using the authority of God to uplift you with. And that's my little bit of a pastor coming in play right there. You know what I'm saying? But that's the truth. Like, do your words, and are the things that they're telling you to do put people down again in the real world or in this program, or are
Right.
they allowing them to lift up and maybe have some grace for the mistakes that they're telling you to beat them down for?
Right.
So that's what I'd say. And again, yes, number 2, Google your program. Google Master's Commission and just go to page 4, because that's where I found this beauty right here. That's where she was at. All right.
Thank you so much. Honestly, like, these conversations that I've been having with people in the last like year about masters,
Yeah.
and ever since I put out this podcast, have been so amazing. And I feel every time I do this, I feel a little bit lighter. Like, and it's
Yes.
just so validating
Yeah.
and nice to know that other people went through that, and also that other people went through that and we're coming out the other side. You know,
That's
we're
the
all
point.
still
I think
trying to
that's the
build
point.
ourselves back up, you know,
Absolutely.
from what happened. And I think anytime you're outside of something for this long and you still have those feelings, like, you went through some shit, you know.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
yeah.
If you can afford a therapist,
Oh my
I
God,
highly
yes.
encourage it. I highly encourage it to
One that has
anybody.
a credentialed and like is a real not Christian
When
therapist.
I went to find my therapist, the first thing I asked was like, "You're not a Christian, are you?" And they're like, "No." I was like, "Okay, good. Then we're gonna work. We'll work. We'll work." So
I think I
I
would tell people
encourage.
also to be honest. Um,
Yes.
have conversations with people who aren't there, your parents, your friends,
Yes.
whoever.
Yes.
Be
Yeah.
honest, because if we were both honest with other people while we were there, we probably
Too.
would have never went back, because they'd have been like, "This is crazy."
Yeah, absolutely. The echo chamber that exists in these spaces creates more of itself. It creates people who treat people and talk to people, like you said, the exact same way, and it perpetrates this culture of toxic Christianity. And oh God, it's awful. It's
It
awful.
does. It does. Well, I won't keep you any longer, but thank you so much, Gavin, for reaching out to me. Thank you for the support, the kind messages, and thank you so much for coming on My Culty College and talking to me. I do have a couple other people, guys, who are from other master's programs who want to come on and chat. If you're listening to this and you've been to any evangelical leadership colleges like this, hit me up, let me know. We're all still deconstructing. We're all still working on
Okay.
it. My DMs are definitely open. You guys can find me on Politics But Make It Fashion 1 on Instagram, and Politics But Make It Fashion on TikTok. That is my other podcast. My name is Amber Viola, and we will chat soon.
Bye.